Good morning, it's sunrise here at Callanish, one of Britain's most ancient monuments, a standing stone circle that's around 5,000 years old. The wide views from where I'm standing are of moorland, bare crofts, the high hills of Harris and shimmering lochs, which is all very beautiful, but it's breakfast time and you can't eat the landscape. Or maybe you can.
Oh yes, you can. Definitely. You can definitely eat the landscape, particularly now as the spring's starting to arrive. And lots of plants are coming out. And then down below us in the bay there, with the tide going out, you can see the seaweeds being exposed too. I've actually eaten well over 300 species of plants myself, and somewhere between 20 and 30 varieties of seaweed. So there's plenty out there.
That's Mo Wild. She's an ethnobotanist and a research herbalist. And she's leading a foraging and feasting event today close to these Neolithic monuments, which are thought to have been raised by the very earliest farmers. So how did farming begin in places like Callanish? I took a walk with Mo.
Well, farming began in places like this really to provide a source of calories for the winter. Because in the winter it's a very, very bleak time when the plants have disappeared below the ground. Yes, you can gather their roots, but once the leaves have disappeared, you can't even find where the roots are. It would have been a very meat-heavy diet, but there wouldn't have been a lot of fat because the animals lose fat during the winter. And so when people found out that they could actually grow crops to give those winter calories, that's when farming really took off. And farming and foraging would have overlapped for a very long period too.
So these standing stones, the Callanish stones, are almost symbolic, I suppose, of the end of nomadic peoples.
Yes, but also people would still have been moving around somewhat. Even once people started farming, they were still technically semi-nomadic in that they would move between their summer camp and their winter camp. Winter, most people would be sort of down near the sea, but during the summer they'd go up to the Sheeling and take the animals up with them. That's the season for milk and all the dairy products.
You've already got a bag there, Mo. What have you got in there?
Well, I've got young ground elder shoots, I've got pig nut leaves, which taste of carrot, and I'm adding to it as we go along. So people would have really farmed for calories, but still carried on using a lot of these as what we call pot herbs, which would have given them the nutritional content.
And the evidence for all of this is from the pots that have been rediscovered with some traces of leftovers in them?
Well, not necessarily. For a long time, archaeologists assumed that people were just eating things like, barley and meat. But in actual fact, some studies from around 2014 onwards, where they started looking at the remains in crannogs that had sunk into bogs. And in a bog, plant remains are very, very well preserved. And all of a sudden they found what us foragers could have told them a long time ago was that people used a lot of plants as well. And for instance, things like silverweed have these long edible roots. Now they're only about 0.5 centimetre thick, although they're very deep. But there's more carbohydrate calories in that than in potato.
You followed a wild diet for a whole year yourself and proved that you can get enough calories. Were you hungry though, and was it hard?
No, I wasn't really hungry at all because I think a lot of these wild foods are much denser, there's a lot more fibre. You feel really satiated on a lot less.
Well, you're taking a group of rookie foragers out for a few hours to see what they can glean for their dinner. Do you think we'll find enough, or might it have to be supplemented today?
I don't think we'll find enough to feed 25 today, but what I really want to do is just open people's eyes to the incredible wealth of things around us.
Have farmers got anything to learn from foraging?
Well, I think so, because a lot of farmers spend a lot of time trying to weed out things that are nutritious and tasty, like chickweed, for example.
Ooh, I'm not sure many farmers could be persuaded to embrace chickweed. Anyway, I've come down to the Macher now, the narrow, fertile strip between the sea and the land that comes alive with flowers in summer. Today, though, it's raining, cold and blowing a gale. But Mo's still making herself heard as she holds up the plants she's finding.
So reed mace is a really useful plant because you can eat so many different parts of it. Underneath in the soft mud, you've got this rhizome, which is really full of starch. Around now in the spring, if we dig one up, you'll start to notice that it's got buds where it's going to produce new shoots from. And if you break the buds off and just boil them, just steam them or boil them up lightly and serve them with butter, salt and pepper, then it's like eating new potatoes.
Well, the landscape we've been wandering across is used communally by a group of crofters, including Richard Greenslade, who joined Mo and the foragers for an hour before hurrying back home here to check on the last of his sheep, which are still to lamb. And you're still waiting. There's no action, is there, Richard?
Couple over there, a Cheviot and a Black Welsh Mountain to go, and one or two of these Hebrideans yet to lamb, yeah.
These are the little traditional black sheep from the islands.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Did you get any surprises about what was being found, or did you learn anything?
Yeah, I learned lots. I mean, Mo's obviously, very well informed about this, yeah, and that was the idea of heading down, to take advantage of her world-class knowledge on the subject. A lot of the plants that are down there, I was quite well aware that were growing anyway. I take an interest in the flowers, but also because of the nature of the agricultural practices down there, the plants get an opportunity to come through.
And you have two flocks, you have Cheviots and you have these little black Hebrideans. Do you notice if they graze differently? Do they choose different plants?
Yeah, definitely. You can see after they've been on the land, the plants they choose to forage, the Hebrideans will take a far wider range, whereas the modern breeds are a bit choosier. They're not going to put the weight on unless you give them the right stuff. I think, I've read stuff about the Hebrideans because of their wider range of forage. You get in these kind of more astringent plants, and some of those are acting as natural anthelmintics, so they're protecting the sheep against worms and things like that. So, that's better than dosing them.
And do we get those flavours then, Richard, when we eat Hebridean lamb?
Well, so they say. You get a fine textured meat because of the slowness of the growth. I think for any sheep, you're going to get the flavours of what they've been on coming through. And that's one thing about all the sheep on the island up here. They're not on modified grasses, diploid and tetraploid, ryegrasses and things like that. At best, they're going to be getting an old-fashioned kind of meadow mix with timothy and fog and things like that in. So they're eating what they're meant to be eating, really. And the meat tells a story.
And you're saying that crofting really enables these plants that Mo was picking up and tasting to thrive.
Exactly, yeah. It's the way we graze the land and the patterns of grazing. And the importance of the maca is well known and it's protected. We work as a local village grazings committee closely with environmental consultants, Nature Scotland and Scottish Government in order to protect and maintain the land as it is.
Well, after battling the wind and the rain for the last few hours, everyone's changed out of their wet weather gear and come to the local hall. In the kitchen, Chef Kenny Mackay's preparing a tasting menu to reflect the feast foods that were probably eaten by those early farmers of Callanish. And I'm just heading in for a quick word now. Hi, Kenny. I suspect there's a bit of culinary and artistic license involved, is there?
Yeah. There's had to be a little bit of license because there wasn't a lot of stuff back then that we could use, extra flavourings and stuff. But I've done a fairly close job, I think.
So what's on the menu?
For the starter, we've got mussels, local mussels, and I'm doing them with a very light fish stock and all the flowers and herbs that were picked today, and a little bit of nettle butter. And it's been served with traditional bannocks, so oat bread. And for the main course, we have a beef and barley porridge.
And is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah.
It looks very substantial.
It's very substantial, very hearty, and I think it would be fairly traditional. I've added carrots and turnip, which you wouldn't normally have back
And the beef? Where did the beef come from?
So local beef as well, yeah, from our local butcher in town, Willie John McDonald. And then for dessert, we have a carrageen pudding, so pudding made with seaweed, milk and honey, and made with some nettle oat cakes, and again some wildflowers and some blackberries.
I know that you work in your own kitchen with local ingredients, especially the fish and the shellfish from Hebridean waters. What are the challenges of devising something like this when you have to consider what might have been available 5,000 years ago?
The challenge really was trying not to add all the things I would normally add. So, garlic, onions, pepper. But we had to use a bit of artistic license for what we were doing here. Otherwise it would have been fairly plain and fairly bland.
It makes you appreciate the wealth of products that you have at your fingertips the rest of the time.
And the flavours of everything that Mo's brought in is just brilliant. It's just really, really interesting. The flowers in particular are like flavour explosions. They're like eating sweets. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Okay, look forward to trying it all.
Great, thank you.
See you later.
Thanks.
And no feast is complete without entertainment. In this case, a kind of Flintstones karaoke with primitive reed instruments and a range of deer bones and shells and stones, obviously. I'm sure it'll catch on. Today's programme was produced and presented by me, Nancy Nicolson.